Okay, so this is going to be the demo for the first start of the skull drawing. And so once again, the general idea with this is you are going to be doing a practice one on the 9 by 12 white, but it should be a fully shaded drawing with charcoal. And then you're going to do a final one on the 12 by 18 black with white charcoal. So what I would like to do for this is do a quick demonstration on how to draw. So there is going to be an additional video online that you can watch that is just, I have a link to a YouTube video that is not mine of a more detailed generic description on how to draw a skull like facing right at you, but it really talks more about the proportions and stuff. This demo is going to be a more simplified demo that just says if I'm looking at a skull, what's the process for how I would draw it? And this could go for any object. So the general idea is you want to start with a light pencil. So I'm starting with a 4H here because I want to do a light sketch. And the general rule we always talk about is you start with an under sketch as a base. And this under sketch is going to help you get the proportions down and just get it set in. But you never should be drawing the final lines right away. You want to be very loose and sketchy with it. So with a human skull, which is what I'm doing for this, for the assignment you don't have to do a human skull, but I'm just demoing this on the human skull as a base shape. Okay, so the way it is you usually start with a circle. The way I think of this skull shape, it's like a circle is the base, and then the jaw kind of hangs off of the bottom of it. So what I'm going to do is I want this skull to be large and fill the paper. So I'm going to start with a very large circle, and I just rotate lightly, and I rotate a few times to get the idea of that circular edge there that I want. Okay. Then what I do is I kind of build the jaw off of that. So I can kind of look roughly at where the jaw is going. And I might not draw it perfectly. I might just draw it as kind of like a base shape. So maybe something that's kind of like rectangular or triangular, something like that. But I'm just going to do like kind of a base outline to kind of set in what I'm seeing for that jaw shape. Okay, so I've kind of got that in there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for where the eyes are. And I would say on this circle, the eyes are usually roughly halfway or maybe slightly in the lower half. It depends on the angle of your skull. So I'm just looking at my reference and I'm trying to estimate roughly where that halfway point is on the eyes. And then you can kind of start to sketch in from there. I can even mark in where the nose is going to go. Now mine's at a 3/4 angle, so my nose is roughly going to be off of like that line right there. So I've kind of marked nose is going to be around here. The eyes are going to be lined up on this. I kind of have a rough idea of where the jaw goes. This is just my start of an initial sketch. So then I'm going to pick a starting point that I kind of want to be like maybe my final area and kind of go from there. So I'm going to start with the nose. So I'm going to start up here and I can see the bridge of the nose kind of comes over. And then I'm just literally just looking at the shape and I'm just being very observational with it. Now, if you want to refer to the other video I posted, they do have some more specific things you can do if you're looking at the skull straight on to kind of get some of these measurements in. But I'm just looking very carefully, and this is just the general idea of observational drawing, looking very carefully at the shape that I'm seeing, but giving myself something as like a baseline to start with, I think really helps with that. And then once I get something in, I can kind of build the rest off of it. So what I'm looking at now is this eye builds right off of the nose, and I can look at where it intersects and where it overlaps. So I'm going to say now that this eye kind of comes over like this, and then I see it kind of coming down this way. And I'm going to go down here. Now I'm probably not going to draw the entire skull for this. I might do like just a quick sketch, but might not be finalized. But then I can see that there's like kind of a shape here and it kind of comes over. So now I've got like that edge of the eye right there. Okay. Now the one thing you're going to notice, my initial circle was a little bit bigger than what I'm at. So I make the adjustment. The eye is actually the complete edge of the face. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just go from here and I'm going to actually build the forehead shape up from that. And then that's going to kind of go into my circle. I might make it a little bit bigger up here, but I'm going to go a little bit darker when I'm kind of doing my finalized lines, just to kind of see where things are. And once again, I'm just being observational and I'm looking at where things are going. So I've kind of got, you know, this little side here and I've got the eye, and now this now becomes the edge of my skull. This part will no longer be a part of the drawing. So I'm just going to very quickly roughly go through. If I were to take my time, I'd probably finalize this a little bit more, but I just want to get something baseline to show you because I do want to do just a little bit of shading on this. Just to show you some of that a little bit, and specifically with the charcoal, right? The thing that can be kind of tricky is like this tooth part, and then we've got like the jaw here or the cheek. So what I look at with this specific image on the cheek, you can see that the line actually goes up to the brow area, comes over, and then kind of turns into that. If I have this eye drawn in where I want to, now I have a reference point where I can reference this right here. I can look at how far away that is. Now I'm slowly going to kind of sketch that over. Now, there's something I want you guys to learn from doing your grid project. So the grid project really got us to break things down, look at it square by square, and draw slowly. And I've been really impressed with what I've seen from grid drawings that have been turned in so far. So you guys are showing me that you're able to look at something carefully and follow it. This skull is no different. You don't have a grid, but if you look at each line carefully and I just carefully follow it and I look at where is it located compared to other things, you guys can still draw well without a grid. And that's kind of the idea, as I'm trying to bridge you now from doing the grid to get you more analytical and looking closely to now trying to take that grid away and see, can I still draw something as detailed as I did? And can I do it in that way, right? So you can see if I just take my time and I carefully look, and I might start with just some generic lines to start, but now I'm kind of getting the upper tooth area there and starting to build that in. And then like if I'm looking here, I've got a little hole on the right. I want to make sure that that hole matches, so I might actually draw this with the intent of getting that whole side to kind of look the right way, right? And I might mark here. What I would maybe do for the teeth. So the teeth I do want to cover because that's kind of a trickier part. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just make a line like in between to show like the middle of roughly where the teeth go. And I'm going to draw just like maybe a big shape here for the bottom of the teeth without drawing in all the detail yet, but following the shape of maybe that bottom line. And then I can kind of get the jaw to build off of that, okay? And then things will adjust. So you'll see that my final line might not match up with that first sketch. That first sketch is just to give me a baseline to get started. And then we kind of go from there. So we'll kind of go with this as a starting point. But you can see I very quickly got my eyes, my nose. I'm starting to get the teeth. The thing with teeth, and there's going to be a big difference between how you draw this, right? When you're drawing the teeth, I'm going to do this. Don't do this and just draw like this. That's not what real teeth look like, right? They're not just squares. They're not perfectly connected. You need to look really closely. And what I recommend is if you are using an image on your Chromebook, that I would recommend like really, really zooming in, right? So you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not willing to like zoom in and really look at something. So if I really dive into the teeth here, we can actually look and draw them one at a time. But if you look at an actual tooth, they're actually rounded at the bottom. And they're basically touching and overlapping the whole way through, except up near the tops and bottoms here, like right near the gums, there'll be a little bit of a gap, but it's kind of like a triangular gap. So when you're drawing them, I shouldn't see like a big full rectangular gap between them. They should touch at some point. So I could just pick a point in here. Maybe I'll just go like towards one of these middle teeth, like right here, and I can start to actually sketch this in. So a couple of common mistakes is that people just make them square or rectangular. And the other mistake is people maybe make them too small. Like these teeth are actually pretty big. And so as I go up here, you can see there's going to be like a little gap, and I can maybe semi-shade that. But like right there, you're putting that little triangular gap in there, and then you're going tooth by tooth and getting those in. So if I do that, I might draw another one, and then once again get that little gap in there. But for the most part, they're touching, right? And then they're kind of rounded at the bottom. The bottom teeth on this example, they're a little bit skinnier, and so I could look and it actually like kind of falls in between here. But I could kind of get that and actually like look at the actual shape that they're doing and then see how are the teeth actually touching. This one goes a little bit lower. They're a little bit taller and skinnier this way. Okay, but don't just like, I think another thing that people do is they just say, oh, I'm going to draw a tooth, and they just repeat the same tooth over and over. But if you really dive in and look at what they're doing, so just this small little sample size, you can see my teeth are all looking vastly different. Okay, and once again, there shouldn't be big gaps in between them. They overlap a lot. So you shouldn't see like a big gap in between the teeth. You shouldn't see like right next to them. The only spot you see a gap are these little triangular areas up there. Okay, so for the base drawing, I'm just going to stop there because otherwise it's going to take me forever and I don't want to spend too much time. I think you guys get the idea, but I do want to talk about shading. So on this one, I would like you to use black charcoal. Now, if you're an online student and you didn't get a kit, you don't have access to it. If you don't have black charcoal, you can shade with pencil on this, but if you have access to the charcoal, this is one that I want to use it. So I'm just going to show some different charcoals that I have available. And if you don't have all of these in your kit, if you're online, you can come and see me if you're at school. Otherwise, once again, just use what you have. But for those of you here watching me live in class, I want to show you what we have. So we have black charcoal pencils. These are also labeled, so they're going to be 6B, 4B, or 2B. So the higher the number, the darker it's going to be. I think the charcoal pencils work great for most of it. We also have these big charcoal sticks for like really big areas. They're kind of like a medium grain. And then we have vine charcoal. So let me just show you the difference between these, and I'm going to show you a good trick. So here's like a 6B. And you can see within this, I can shade very dark, and then I can also lighten pressure, and I could get like a range of value just with this. And what you're going to find with charcoal, it's got very fine particles. It blends very easily. So if you're someone that struggled blending with pencil, usually the charcoal helps that, because it does blend very easy. You can see I can get a pretty nice smooth blend there with that fairly easily. This is what the charcoal stick looks like. This I would just use mainly for like large areas, but it's going to be very similar to the pencil. It's going to be very dark. Okay, and you can see I can blend that out. And what you'll notice too, when you blend with these blending stumps, like it'll hold a lot of charcoal on it. So if I have a lighter area, I could just kind of light pressure put some on. You're going to find if you have a very light value, you're not going to be able to directly draw on it with charcoal. It's going to be too dark. So you got to do tricks like just soak some of it up in here and then just lightly put some on the side like that and try to get those lighter values as well. Okay, the vine charcoal, I really like this as well. This naturally is going to be a lot lighter in color. Even when you put it down, it might look really dark, but the vine charcoal is very brittle and blends very, very easily. I'm actually going to clean this off so I can get just the vine charcoal. So remember, you do have sandpaper. That's to clean off your blending stick. Okay, so I'm going to clean it off a little bit. But here's the vine charcoal. You can see it spreads a lot, and it gets really light when I spread it. So a good trick you can do, especially if you're doing some subtle lighter values, maybe things that look a little bit smokier or foggier, I'm going to show you a fun trick you can do where you can kind of paint with the charcoal. So what you could do is you could take like the vine charcoal or the regular charcoal and you can actually rub it onto the sandpaper and you can kind of create like a little pile of particles. And then what you could do is you could actually take a brush and I could use the brush to soak up the particles and you can actually paint the particles down. And you can do that to create some subtle lighter values, okay? So when you're drawing your skull, I mean, the skull inherently is a lighter object. So you're only going to have a few areas that are very, very dark, and then you're going to have to go in and do some more subtle things with it, right? So you'll kind of have to look. But remember, the idea here is that we want to define the edges and the lines with values, right? So for example, when I'm finished with this, I do not want to see a dark outline around the eye. I simply create the value that's in here, and that separation is going to create the object. So if I say when in here, you know, this is fairly dark, so I could kind of fill this in, but I want to go right up to the edge of that nose line, and I want to go and like really create like a nice clean edge there, and then I'm going to start to shade that. And just like I kind of showed you on the other sheet, you just kind of do gradients and values once again by applying different pressures, using different amounts of the charcoal, and maybe once again just using what's on here. So I might just smooth this out. In the charcoal, you definitely want to smooth it out, but the trick is you go right up to the edge of that nose there, and I'm going to go right up to the edge of this eye, and I'm going to try to create that edge with the charcoal rather than like an outline. Okay, and once again, that's the key to realism, is doing that. And the other thing is don't just make the eyes pure black, because that's, you know, what you're maybe used to. They're a little bit more subtle than that. This eye in particular is a little bit darker, but it kind of fades out a little bit. So you could take like an eraser. I forgot to grab an eraser. But you could take an eraser and like smudge and pull some of that out and make some of that a little bit lighter, right? If I'm looking at this eye over here in particular, we can zoom in on it. But you can see this isn't pure black. It's actually got a little bit of lighter area down there, and then the value. So I just recommend you really zoom in, look at the values, and try to get that in. And then as you go through, just look at each section one part at a time and slowly start to get that shading in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the video there, and hopefully that helps.